All right. So Dan Kuprin here with Stellar Jiu-Jitsu. And here's the problem with are you in Roncevert? Is that how you say that? You're close?
We're yeah, we're like right on the border of Lewisburg and Ronsford. I say we're in Lewisburg, so yeah, Lewisburg,
That's
West
way
Virginia.
yeah, it's way easier to say than
Yeah, yeah,
Roncevert.
Lewisburg's easier.
Yeah, and the funny thing is just I was telling you in text, I work at Greenbrier Valley Medical Center doing MRI sometimes, and
Cool.
I didn't even know when I would look at the exit and see that word Roncevert, because it doesn't
Yeah,
look like it sounds right, and I'm like, I don't even know where I'm at. And then patients would tell me, I'm like, where are we at? And they would say that word, but it looks not like that. It's
yeah, yeah. Really, it sounds like Ronceverte. Yeah, I just go with Lewisburg. Lewisburg's nice and easy, nice and clean. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll tell you, obviously I've never seen it, but from the pictures, your gym, just so you know, I think it looks awesome. That I like the
Thank you.
yellow mats. I like the sharpens iron logo that you guys have. And I was looking at the pictures the other day before I text you, and so I know. So is Brian Adderson? Is that kind of like? Are you guys like an affiliate of his, or not really, or how does that work?
Sort of, not really. He was one of like the beginning affiliates of the academy.
Okay.
We're directly through George Gurgel now out of Cincinnati.
Okay.
So that's our like direct affiliate. But Brian Adderson had a lot of influence on the school in the early days, and like the early stages of our training. So yeah, we got him up on the banner up at the top on the decals on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, and for guys that don't know who Brian is, Brian Adderson is he's amazing. First of all,
Yeah.
he's got a great jujitsu build, meaning he's kind of a tall, lanky guy, skinny, but he's not like I mean, he's in shape, but great jujitsu build. I've known of him and been around him and seen him roll since actually like there was a time I think it may have been 2002. Himself, Ashley Lockwood, um, I can't remember who else. Phil Dunlap from Ground Zero Morgantown. All of them. We were like one of the first seminars I had Kaiki in. For anybody who knows who that is, and it's kind of one of the big first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu seminars in West Virginia. And the reason I had him is I had a friend Morgan Hayes, who's actually he's deceased now. He died in motorcycle accident in Thailand. But anyway, he had trained with the Gracies a long time ago in Torrance. So he moved here, and that's when Kaiki was still there. So anyway, he was good friends with Kaiki, and he's like, man, I can bring this guy down. I happen to meet him, so we brought him down. We were all white belts, so it was amazing. So I have those pictures, and I look back at 2002, and it's me and again Ashley. I'm pretty sure Brian was there. If he wasn't there, he was there not long after, and Phil Dunlap, who are the pioneers of jujitsu. Ground Zero, those guys were before me too. They probably I don't know how many months or a year before me, but they I think Ashley and them had originally trained with Lloyd Irvin and did some stuff. And anyway, for guys that don't, those guys are pioneers. Brian Anderson's amazing. He's not too much, I don't, if at all, on social media. It's very quiet. So a lot of people don't know who he is. But when he was competing, he was amazing. He actually competed in one of my tournaments and beat Mike O'Donnell, who is he may have fought in the UFC. If not the UFC, he's fought in some big events as a Carlson Gracie black belt. And that's back when like those guys were the kings, and Brian had beat him way back then. And but anyway, so it's props to all those guys. And I remember seeing pictures way back when George Euler was at your gym way back a long time ago,
Yep. Yep.
right? And that's probably because he was under Brian at the time. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think he's been kicked off SAS team or some kind of drama. But
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of drama there, but yeah, we
yeah,
trained with George a lot, trained with Brian a lot, so we did a lot of cross training with those guys. So there's a ton of influence from those two guys to our gym right now for sure.
so what, Dan, and obviously, so if you're like, we've never talked before that
Yep.
you're talking about, but so what is your background? Did you wrestle before? Or did you just get in jiu-jitsu through those guys, or how did this all happen?
So no, actually, so the story of how I got started out in Lewisburg. I actually started training in Philadelphia,
Oh,
in a place called Philly Jiu-Jitsu under Damon Umholtz. Um, so I started out in college. I was probably like 20 around there, maybe like late 19, 20, somewhere around there. And I started training there, and I got my blue belt there before I moved out to Lewisburg actually. So yeah, I started out in Philly, and I moved out to Lewisburg. As the story goes, I basically moved into Lewisburg, started looking for gyms. I know Brian and George were training at the time, but they never came under my radar. Like I was looking for gyms. I didn't come across anybody. And basically how I started was I created a Facebook ad account and I made an ad looking for training partners.
It's awesome, man.
And
It really is
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And that's all it was. I didn't try to start a school, nothing. I was just like, I'm still trying to do jujitsu. I'm just looking for anybody else here that's trained. There's a medical school, the O school here in Lewisburg. So there's a ton of people coming in from all over the country. So there's a lot of people that roll through here that I've got a decent amount of training, and that's who I was basically trying to find. And yeah, so I got hits on those ads, and people message me and be like, "Hey, listen, I'm a blue belt. I was training Gracie Baja, go wherever. I want to train." I get some messages from some wrestlers, some high level wrestlers, like, "Hey, I haven't done jiu-jitsu, but I'll teach you some wrestling. You teach me some jiu-jitsu." So we sort of had an exchange of trades like that. And that's how it sort of started. And basically that was probably, it's hard to tell, probably somewhere around like 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. I was starting that up, and we called that Lewisburg Jiu-Jitsu Club. And
Really?
I was just basically getting hits off of Facebook of guys rolling through Lewisburg, rolling through the area that wanted to train. Most of them were at the O school. And we started up this little club. I didn't even feel comfortable calling it academy or like a school or anything. It was just guys getting together, rolling. And then over time, we got messages from other people that everybody knew. They're saying, "Listen, why don't you teach us some stuff? Like, let's do like a class, teach us some self-defense, teach us here and there, just teach us some things." So I didn't really feel super comfortable. I was just a blue belt at the time. But people wanted to learn. So like, listen, I sort of took a selfish approach. I decided I'm just going to teach everyone everything I know. And that way I have rolling partners. And I just try to get people as comfortable rolling and as good as they could possibly be, so I could have rolling partners. And from there it sort of took off. Yeah.
Let me ask, just because I know a little bit about your guys. So was Adam a part of the starting?
Yeah.
What's Adam's last name?
Adam Martin. Yeah.
Martin,
So he was a big part. So as the story goes for our little local gym here, I was looking for training partners, and I eventually came across Adam. And actually, the funny thing was, he was at a basketball game at the high school, and he was wearing like a Jacare shirt, right? And I was like, man, this guy's got to train. He's wearing a Jacare shirt. So I just went up and started talking to him. And we started talking about jiu-jitsu, and I think he was like a blue belt or something at the time.
Yeah. Probably, was he under Solo at the time?
He was under Brian Adderson at the time. And that's how I became familiar and actually started training with Brian. We would start making trips up to Beckley, because before I met Adam, I had no idea that Brian was up in Beckley. There was a gym close by up in Beckley.
Well, how far is Beckley from you, by the way?
About like 45 minutes. It's not too far. Maybe an hour. Yeah, it depends.
That's
but
not bad at all.
It's not bad at all. Yeah. Yep. So I met Adam, and we started more training much more regularly. And we set up shop. I was originally in actually a jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu dojo, and they let us use their mats, and we paid them like a monthly fee. It was like $100 or something like that a month. I didn't charge anybody mat fees. It was just like, let's cover this $100. If we have, however many people, we just cover the $100 a month, and that's our mat fees. We just kind of threw all our money into a pool. And then I was working for the school district in the area at the time, and they got us set up with the wrestling room at Greenbrier East at the local high school here. So we started training out of the wrestling room, and that's awesome, because they got an awesome wrestling facility here, like top quality wrestling facility, great mats, just big building. So we started training there. I mean, we started training a ton. We started bringing in other people. Another local guy actually runs another academy, Alex Workman. We started training with him. So we started creating this sort of little group. And once it started building up, I actually moved to Morgantown for roughly 2 years. And at the time when I moved out, Adam and Alex Workman Hibara Jiu-Jitsu. So they switched to Hibara Jiu-Jitsu and started like the official academy, like the legit school.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, yeah, I eventually came back after 2 years. They had a falling out. They actually split academies and I took over the SAS school. Yeah. Under Georges Gurgel. And that's how.
Yeah. I'm glad you remember, because like I'm trying to be friends with everybody in West Virginia. I do remember, now that you say that was a solo affiliate while Adam was there for a while, right? And then he must have been looking for somebody else, because I kind of remember the transition, and then I remember, of course, when Dustin brought AGC down there and had a tournament. Yeah, which is all good. Like, that's the point, is we're trying to grow jiu-jitsu in West Virginia and your area. I mean, you guys, obviously Beckley 45 minutes away is good, but your Lewisburg is, at the time, at one point in time, was rated the coolest little town in America, right? So how can we have the coolest town in America and not have a jiu-jitsu academy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to have a jiu-jitsu school. It's a requirement if you're going to be a cool small town, for sure.
Yes, essentially, by proxy, you guys are the coolest jiu-jitsu gym in West Virginia or America, right? By
there you go. By proxy, I like that. That works.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. So, Gary, go ahead. I have a tendency to take over these things when I know somebody. So go ahead, Gary.
No, that's okay. So right now, about how many students do you have, and like how many classes do you run a week?
Yeah, so we run Monday through Friday for our classes. Student-wise, we run both adults and kids classes. So combined with all of them, hard to say. I have to look for over 40.
That's awesome.
So
man.
Yeah.
So close to or over 40 with the adults and the kids. Yeah, and that's 5 days a week. We got 2 kids classes. We run 4 to 7 years old, and then 7 years old to teenager until they can move up into the adults class. And then we run 5 adults classes a week, 3 gi and 2 no gi. Yep.
So, Gary, have you ever been to Lewisburg by chance?
I've not.
It is a cool town. Obviously that's where the Greenbrier is. And for example, for people that know where the Greenbrier is, that's a bunker. There used to be a bunker for the White House, which they have like a mini White House in there. I was actually there one time at a swimming pool, and Tom Cruise was in. I think it was literally just me, and then Tom Cruise and his daughter, which was odd. And you know what I'm saying? Like I was very confused. I didn't know whether to talk to him or not. But anyway, it's a cool little town. Again, rated the coolest town in America at one point. Just nice old school. And like I said, they have a beautiful gym. That area is amazing. So props to you guys, and props to the growth that you got. And why I wanted to jump in is I wanted, and I kind of told you this when I texted you and asked you to do this podcast, but when I work at that hospital, I run into people all the time. I don't know. Well, one reason is I obviously wear scrubs, but when it's cold, I'd have a shirt, like a jacket on, and it had my gym on it. It wasn't for advertising purposes, just like a gym, And people, oh, you do jiu-jitsu? I train with Dan at Stellar Jiu-Jitsu, and they'd always, for real, they'd talk to you. And then there's a guy that I don't remember his name, but he said that maybe he did wrestling, and maybe he was showing you guys wrestling, and you guys were showing jiu-jitsu. I don't know. It's kind of the same story. And then I met Adam Martin's wife. She works at that hospital. She was a nurse there, and she was like, oh, you probably know my husband. He does jiu-jitsu. So it was like, as always, jiu-jitsu is such a small community. Like, man, that's how you can kind of sniff out the idiots, when sometimes when people are like, hey, I'm a black belt, I do this or do that. And it's easy to figure stuff out. Right. But yeah, so it was awesome. So it was a pleasure to meet all those guys. And every time I, meet somebody, I said, man, those, from what I can tell on Instagram, which is, I've got you guys added. I love looking at your pictures. I love seeing what you guys do. Again, we don't get to talk too much because Charleston and Lewisburg is about 2 hours away.
Yeah.
So we're never really around each other other than, again, I was working there. But it's amazing. So I look forward to this opportunity to talk to you guys. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was just how crazy or how different the thing is. You guys are starting something in Lewisburg. So there's not a lot of tournaments in Lewisburg. We talked about, obviously Dustin, he came in and threw 1 or 2 tournaments there, but That's not really like a mecca of jiu-jitsu in that area. Most of West Virginia is obviously not a mecca of jiu-jitsu. I threw tournaments here because of that. I'm not trying to throw tournaments here because of any other reason. I'm trying to do like an underserved area, really. So going on what kind of Gary was talking about earlier, how do you navigate through your regular student and somebody that wants to compete? Or are you, I'm assuming you're not, are you strictly a competition gym? Are you doing a little bit of the middle like Gary and I do? That's what Gary and I have talked about. We try to play the middle. We're not a self-defense gym. We're not a competition gym, but we definitely feel like we're in the middle. I came from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, so I have the self-defense background. Gary does as well. But we also like to compete. I don't, but Gary does. Gary's our competitor. So let us, what's your thoughts on all that right there?
So that's actually a good question. So I would put us leaning towards a competition side as far as like a competition school versus a self-defense school. And sort of my methodology for that process, or like that sort of train of thought, is that like good competition training and like a good competition like curriculum will prepare you for self-defense to a high level. So I think that one of the important things about getting like sort of prepared to self-defense is the consistency of your training. Like you need to be consistently in the gym. That's the most important thing. I think it more so overcomes like just like learning certain techniques. Like you need to be consistently in the gym, consistently being pushed, and just feeling the sort of like intensity of the role when somebody's on you and they're giving you like, they're giving you some power, they're giving you some intensity, the speed's amping up. You need to be able to sort of navigate that sort of framework. You know what I mean? So you're training for competition like that basically all the time. And I'm not sure that anything will really get you prepared for a self-defense engagement better, because you'll be training competition wise like that basically your whole jiu-jitsu career. You'll have intense roles, you'll be doing a lot of drilling, things like that. And just when somebody, puts their hands on you aggressively, your frame of mind is clear, ready, like it clicks on, you know what I mean? And that's really, really important. So that was sort of my mindset from the beginning when I was sort of starting the gym and starting to train people. I was always really sort of worried about not just the jiu-jitsu self-defense thing is a little bit different, but just sort of the standard sort of self-defense where maybe like how they do in colleges sometimes, where they'll do like a self-defense seminar for like the women or something for like 2 hours or maybe an hour and a half. And then they won't touch a martial art for maybe the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? And it's just like, here's your 2 hours. Here's some moves, like grab your keys out of your purse, put them between your fingers, like punch them in the face. And then, maybe if the next day they got assaulted by somebody, it would work, but maybe they don't get assaulted by somebody for another decade or so. You know what I mean?
I can't agree more with you on consistency. It's regardless of how well, this is an opinion now, but regardless of how well the technique, it really is putting it into practice against a resisting opponent that makes it true. And we kind of talk about that a lot, like truth on the mat is I can demonstrate the technique flawlessly, but that is with a willing participant to let me throw them or let me take them down or let me do an arm bar. It's different when you have a resisting opponent who's also trying to do the same thing to you. And nothing is going to come close to simulating that as constant regular training at least an elevated level, not necessarily competition level, but at least elevated where both people are trying to win. And that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu is that we can go pretty much as hard as we want with relative safety.
Yep. So 100%. That's basically my train of thought right there. You can go, you can sort of gauge how much effort you want to put into the rolls, right? But if you want, you could go almost 100%, like without hurting each other. You really feel the strength intensity of the roll, of the engagement. And for a lot of people that are looking for self-defense, that sort of initial contact when somebody grabs you is the most important moment. Like it's a compilation of moments, right? And when somebody grabs you and you have to react right away, you will either have the deer in the headlights sort of effect. If you've done like, you trained a little bit, you did you're a self-defense seminar a while ago. You don't train all that often. You'll come in and like train a little bit versus somebody grabs you and you're like, you're ready to go. You do this every day for 2 hours, it's easy. It just sort of clicks on. I think that sort of split second moment is really important when it comes to like a real self-defense scenario. And obviously in jiu-jitsu, the great thing is that all the techniques are very applicable. You may have some, competition stuff that you won't, necessarily use in a self-defense scenario, but you just have to sort of frame your training, when you're training how you want to do it. Like you're not going to like invert guard or something like in a street defense scenario. But at the same time, you're thinking about street defense scenarios. Essentially, you're going against an opponent that you're assuming knows nothing as far as a martial art is concerned, right? They're just whatever, drunk, aggressive, they're grabbing you, you need to sort of react. So your base level jiu-jitsu techniques that should work on an entry day white belt should work on whoever's grabbing you out in the street, right? And if for some reason they have good instincts or something happens that it starts to escalate more technically, you should be able to handle that as well. So I always sort of come in when I have new students coming in, I try to ask them what their expectations are. I think that's really important when you have a new student coming in, because almost everybody I ask that question has something different. Like some people just want to get in shape, right? Some people want to learn some good self-defense. Like they're afraid, they want to build some confidence just being out in the street. Some people are interested in competition, like right away. They just want to compete. Like maybe they were wrestlers or they came from high school competing in basketball or anything like that, soccer. They just want to compete. So I asked them what the expectations are, and I sort of mentally prepared them for what the training is sort of going to look like. Because you'll have a lot of people coming in and they'll sort of want like the 5-palm, like exploding heart technique, right? They just want like the move, like just tell me the move. Like, how do I win the fight? Like somebody comes in at me in the street, like, how do I just, destroy them and finish it? And I got to break like the hard reality to them that it's not really like that. You know what I mean? You need to be in the gym. You need to be training. You need to be fit. You just need to be ready to go. And that part comes from just going into the gym and training every day or every other day. You don't have to train every day, but like, it has to be on your mind. And for most people that like the jiu-jitsu bug sort of bites them a little bit, it gets in their head and they're just like, man, all right, what am I going to do? What do I have to move around in my life in order to get the jiu-jitsu in now? You know what I mean? So they'll be like, okay, I can make it 2 days a week. And they make it 2 days a week religiously now. And then they sneak that third day a week every once in a while. But it's sort of an important shift in your mind where like, okay, I was doing this other thing that's not beneficial for my goals. And now I'm shifting my time over to jiu-jitsu. And the competition training is important because it gives you that consistency of training. A lot of people talk about sort of the art of the martial arts. One of the big parts about the art is the training part, like not just learning the techniques, but like being in the gym and actually like training the moves. That's a huge part, especially if you're training for longevity. It's not easy. It's hard on your body. You know what I mean? There's like social politics involved and, egos that have to be dealt with and like aggression levels that need to be controlled and all this and that. It's like the gym environment is like a big dynamic environment. So you just learning how to train for a long time, your whole life is a huge part of the art of the martial art, I think.
Yeah, and I like what you say, but because lately at the gym, I've been talking about the art of martial arts, meaning that you get to express your jiu-jitsu, right? That's the art part. Like the martial art is us doing jiu-jitsu, but the art part of the martial art is we're not cookie cutter people, meaning that I might be the trainer, you might be the trainer, Gary's the trainer, but we all don't want cookie cutters of us, right? We want you to be you, meaning like your favorite move may be the arm bar just for whatever reason, but some other guy is the guillotine or a leg lock, and that's part of expressing you. You're the paintbrush, right? You're painting your picture and doing the art. So I like that. And I think, Gary and I would agree with a lot of what you said as far as we're all in the middle, right? So meaning that we do think the way that we train the competition style is training you for self-defense. But I will say, Gary and I both came from a Gracie self-defense background. I was with Hoist Gracie till I was a purple belt. And I think Gary, you were under Helston for a while, correct? To blue belt or purple belt, but there's a distinct difference, right? So and I was just explaining something at the gym tonight, at my gym, and they're asking the difference, and it's kind of hard to explain, but I was just saying, like, what they focus on is the guy that doesn't know anything, right? So there's some moves that we would show in self-defense, and you or I or anybody at our gym that's a blue belt, or I would be like, I would never do that. And I said, well, yeah, you wouldn't, because you fight. But the guy that doesn't fight is probably going to do something. It's going to work. For example, there's a move in Gracie's self-defense where a guy's two-hand choking you face to face to your neck, two-hand choke. And one of the escapes is just to duck your head and twist out, right? Where a guy that trains, meaning you, all of us, like, because they duck down and scoot their head out, is going to take a knee to the face. Like, that's what we're thinking. Like, yeah, if you do that, I'm going to destroy your face. But the reality is that most guys that don't train are not, right? The problem that I think we all see with that is not that that's wrong, is that nowadays, man, everybody knows something. Like, I know when people walk into my gym, they watch UFC, they watch The Ultimate Fighter, they know something. Like, I've had guys that I could swear up and down, and if I'm going to take them for their word, because they're rolling, they're doing moves, and I'm like, hey, you've trained before, right? And they're like, no, never. And I hear that all the time. Like, people, I swear to God, I never. And they're like, yes, you have. Then you wrestled. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm like, there's something going on here, because this guy's been here for like a month and you're giving him all he's got. Like, you know what I mean? And there's something weird. And they're like, I swear to God, I've never done it. So, and that's happened enough to where I do believe some of them people, they still train, but what they mean is they've not trained formally. And I was one of those guys. I rolled with a bunch of my friends in basements and garages and stuff forever. But if somebody asked me if I train, I would probably, at that time back in the 90s, 98, 99, I'd say no, because I didn't have a trainer, right? But I also, the difference, I didn't have, like, I watched some UFCs, and it was like when I learned how to train, like, I swear, like, me and my friends would rent UFC videos and see what Hoist Gracie did, and then go try to practice the moves. There's something different. Like, nowadays, when somebody can just go on YouTube and do a move, right? And then access, like, the other thing, like, Gary and I talk this all the time, like I paid $50 to $75 and did seminars with blue belts, like a ton, because there was nobody. Like, when I looked at a blue belt, that's what, like, I would see a blue belt and they said, man, that guy's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And we'd almost look at him like a god. We're like, that guy could beat Mike Tyson's ass. That's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Like, that's what we would say, which nowadays things are a little different, because there's blue belts on every corner. They're not looked at the same, but jiu-jitsu's changed. So it's different. But also, and what you said is exactly right. Like, I still teach Gracie self-defense seminars that I learned from Hoist, but what I do is exactly what you said. I preface them at the beginning, a ton of stuff. I break all the preconceived notions, where I say, hey man, if you kick me in the balls, I'm probably going to kill you. And they'd be like, what? And I'd be like, look, it hurts, but I'm going to deal with the pain after. The thing is, if I'm attacking you, I'm probably on drugs or I'm crazy, because if I'm normal, I'm not attacking you. Right. So I'm going to deal with that pain later. Most likely your kick or your punch is not that strong. I'm like, no offense, women, but Gary here is a trained fighter. Dan's a trained fighter. They hit me as hard as they can. I usually hit them back. We smile at each other. We continue to hit each other. You have no punching power or skill. If you hit me, most likely you're just going to make me mad. I'm going to kill you. And everybody's like at the beginning, they're like, well, why am I here? Because you're like just ruining my day. But then I say, well, here's the thing. Like, what I'm trying to teach you is how to escape. So the point is, a guy's going to attack you. I'm going to teach you a couple moves. you need to just get away. Striking secondary, striking is not primary, because if you strike with me, I am, a trained striker. You're not going to win. Or I'm a big giant man who's crazy on drugs. You're not going to win. Kind of get all that out of the way. And then we talk about the other things, and all of it is relevant to a degree, right? I do think, like, for example, I'm not knocking, like, we had a great talk with Mike Stump and Jason Campbell from Parkersburg, and I do agree with what they're saying. They're just on a different wavelength, meaning that their primary focus is just the self-defense against people that don't know what to do. And those guys are also cops, and they're dealing with these things in real life, and it has worked for them against those people, right? But what we're also doing is saying, like, our primary focus most likely is we would like to compete. There's all these cool moves where we have these, especially with the gi, we have some gi grips that, like, I'm not going to do lasso guard or invert, just like you said, inverted guard against all these people, and probably even daily heaver guard for that matter. I'm not going to do that stuff. I don't need to, but I can grab their clothes and slow them down. And it doesn't really matter if they have clothes on or not. That's like, we do gi and no gis interchangeably when we do street fighting. I would kind of argue half the time I may or may not do leg lock and no gi, like, in a street fight, because people, they're still going to fight, right? Like, you may do it, and just like I may do an arm bar, but I don't expect that to end the fight. I may break the guy's arm, and I figure I'm going to still be fighting, until I choke him unconscious or get on top. But I like what what I'm saying? Like, I think Gary and I are on the same wavelength, and I'm not against what Mike and Jason said in the last one at all, because that's where I came from, and so did Gary. It's just it's like we chose a different path for our guys, right? Meaning that you'd like to go and those guys compete too. So I'm not saying anything about that. We just chose a different path, right? I don't even know how to explain it to somebody. Like, when we're doing competition style training, it's harder training than what that's going on, right? I don't even, I guess I'm struggling for words how to explain the difference. Do you guys have something that I'm missing? Because I don't,
Well,
because I'm not
I would,
everything.
yeah, and I would say for me it is this. And before I go into the difference in the training styles, whether it be competition versus self-defense, I kind of want to piggyback off of what you'd said. Is like, you and a few friends, the new guy who shows up who seems like he can train, and he swears he hasn't trained, but he's like, yeah, I wrestle with my buddies in their garage. I think it kind of goes back to what me and Dan were saying there, is that regular competition, like, even though it wasn't jiu-jitsu, they were, him and his friends were regularly testing each other, and you learn something in that, and you learn how to manipulate bodies. Maybe you don't know technical jiu-jitsu, but you are experiencing some sort of adversity there that you wouldn't see just sitting at home watching the UFC. They were actually testing. So I think there's that. But as far as the difference in training, and which kind of brings me to what I would like to talk about, is like getting ready for a competition. But I've always heard it said, like, we learn jiu-jitsu because, whatever it was brought us to jiu-jitsu. Self-defense, you want to get in shape, whatever it is brought us to jiu-jitsu. Rolling is what brings us back. Sparring is what brings us back and keeps us in jiu-jitsu past blue belt. Because if all I wanted was self-defense, I really don't need anything after blue belt. Kind of like what we were talking about, like, especially like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, their whole thing is that after you get a blue belt, you should be good against 98% of the population who don't know anything. So it really comes down to competition, whether it be in-house or going to competitions. The training is what brings us back and keeps me coming. And I don't know if when I was under Helston school, we had that a little bit, but it changed when I started training with people who are more competition mindset. And I noticed that my jiu-jitsu accelerated as far as like jiu-jitsu versus other practitioners, and that also that as I was accelerating in my experience and my abilities, that it made everybody around me better, which made, in order to get better, we had to roll harder, if that makes sense. And so when you're only mindset is self-defense, I don't think you're really worried so much about who's getting the best of who today. You know, Dan?
Yeah, no, all that makes that makes a lot of sense, and that's really mirrors a lot of like my sort of thinking on the subject. Like, I think we're like basically on the same page as far as that goes for sure. I think there's a few layers to it. I think some of them are a little bit more subtle. Like, for example, I'll say, um, if you're if you're only doing self defense and you're not rolling, you're missing one of the like key sort of fundamental things that will makes jujitsu really great. Like, being able to actively roll is so huge in jujitsu. It's so massive. And I go as far as to say, and I do this with my students, that if you take an entire like jujitsu curriculum out for like somebody coming in as a white belt, right? You just throw the entire curriculum out and you have them purely roll with really, really good, like, you know, purple belts and up. And you just have them roll nonstop. So the purple belts aren't like, and everybody up aren't just completely destroying them, right? Just for the fun of it. They're putting them in the bad positions, and they sort of like have like a guided roll with everybody. You will get a person that's a white belt up to a blue belt insanely fast. Like, it will be a very, very fast progression. And I would argue that it would be a faster progression than you would just teach them technique and then do some rolls. Technique and then do some rolls. If you just did pure rolling with high level guys that can control themselves, control their energy, control their output with brand new like white belts, you will get them to like the blue belts, like mid blue belt level insanely fast. Just because the benefit of rolling is so massive. And if you take that away out of jiu-jitsu, I'm not really sure that it might be something else at that point. Like, you might have to give it another name just because it's such a big thing. Another big thing about it is if you're not applying the rolling portion and then like the tougher competition training, you lose another big benefit where you try to find ways to up your game that aren't pure technique. And that happens by like starting to work out outside the gym, starting to improve your diet outside the gym, starting to do like active, more like conscious recovery outside the gym. So like maybe your sleep was really disrupted and you notice that you're not really recovering well for your training. You will start to adjusting your sleep, and adjusting your sleep means adjusting your lifestyle normally. So you sort of start slowly adjusting the trajectory of your life in sort of a better way. Just because you'll come into the gym, you have to deal with this really, really difficult thing every day, you know, rolling with whoever, right? And you're like, okay, I don't know that much technique, but boy, am I getting really tired. So maybe I need to do a little bit more cardio outside the gym. So now you got to like start, you know, adjusting your diet and just like little things. So that way jiu-jitsu starts to really integrate into your life a little bit deeper, and you'll get more benefit. And I mean, I started out with a pretty close self-defense background. Like, it was pretty intense. My original instructor, I think, got his purple belt from Helson. So, and it's not to say that self-defense is right and competition jiu-jitsu is wrong. Like, it's all the same thing. It's more closer to training methodologies. Like, I teach self-defense moves to the white belts and everybody like all the time. Sometimes one day I'll just teach self-defense moves. So it's not that one thing is right or one thing is wrong. It's just it's how you want to sort of frame the jiu-jitsu into your life. If you want to take full advantage, you need to let it sort of integrate into you as you start training. I always tell people that if you come into the gym and you decide that you're like, yeah, I'm going to train jiu-jitsu, and you end up training jiu-jitsu for years and years, like you're taking 2 or 3 days out of the week, however much time you can find, you're coming into the gym and you're training years and years, but you don't let the martial arts sort of integrate into your life. You don't pull anything more out of it than just learning a technique here and there. You're kind of wasting your time. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to go in there and you're learning technique and then it's done. Like, it has to sort of integrate into you. Like, okay, I'm going to adjust now. Okay, I need to get a little bit stronger. I need to get a little bit more mobile. I need to get a little bit more flexible. I got all these injuries. I need to figure out how to like heal on my injuries into like a 2-day time span to come back and train again. You know what I mean? I got to adjust my sleep schedule. and it just sort of uplifts you from there. I think that's a big part of the competition side. If you want to even say competition side, not everybody that trains with the competition team, if you want to say that, has to compete. It's not about going out and then, okay, if you're training here, you got to compete. It's not that. It's just that the competition style of training is a real important, I think, part of just overall jiu-jitsu. You don't have to have either or. It's just an important part.
Well, it sounds like to me that you live, which I admire. You live you eat. I mean, you eat, breathe, sleep jiu-jitsu, which is living a martial art lifestyle, right? And I've talked to people at the gym of that same thing, right? Like I could go out, for example, if open mats on Saturday or classes on Saturday, I could go out Friday night and get drunk, be hungover, and I'm going to get my ass kicked on Saturday. Or I can make the decision, I'm going to get my ass kicked on Saturday if I do that same thing. So maybe I shouldn't, which in turn makes my life better, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard a great podcast with Jean-Jacques Machado on Joe Rogan about the same thing. It really motivated me. But those are the same things he was talking about. Like he was saying, you know, obviously he's an instructor, he's a legend, but he'll go out and run before class and make himself tired. And he doesn't tell students that. He'll come and he's living the lifestyle. He eats right. You know, he's exercising more, and everything he does is designed to make his jiu-jitsu better, which in turn kind of makes his life better.
Yeah.
And then when I hear stuff like that, that's why I train the way that I do or teach the way that I do. I think it's really motivating. And that kind of goes back to what my philosophy is, and probably in all of us, I think, is that's why we like the competition style, because it's a little bit more hardcore, right? We come to the gym and sometimes I know we do, we'll have like 5-minute matches for an hour, right? So you're just rolling from one belt level to the next and on and on and on. And you're just trying to give it all you got, and you're going with killers, right? And that's not self-defense per se, because nobody's throwing a sucker punch at you. Nobody's trying to choke you. But they are, like you said earlier, they're putting hands on you. And it goes back to what Mike and Jason said in the last podcast, where they're talking about their police, and there is chaos. And going back to what another podcast with Joe Rogan and Jocko, is staying clear in the chaos, right? That's what jiu-jitsu helps you do. We've been in the chaotic situations where it is a blur, where you're just rolling, and sometimes you're on autopilot. There's no time to think. You adjust and counter, and they counter, and you're just all over the mat, and it's fun, but it's chaotic. And then when we get in that same position, whether it's somebody that attacked us on the street or attacked a police officer, we can keep that level head. We're not reaching for a weapon, where they laid hands on us, but we know we can protect ourselves, and we're probably going to get the better of the guy. So the last thing we're thinking of is grabbing a taser, a gun. And quite honestly, that's where Jason and Mike were. Again, I just want to make it clear, we're not knocking what they're doing. It's a different style at all, because we all come from that background. So I want to make clear, those guys are awesome. I'm just saying there's a difference in, like, most of us are, rather even everybody's competing or not, there's a difference when you're getting ready for purely competition style versus self-defense style. And whether you choose that direction or not, I would argue, I mean, we had this on the last podcast, is those guys and the guys in Beckley and everybody that does the self-defense style, they have, quite honestly, 10 times more students than all of us have. Let's just be honest, right? So, and that's what I say. I give those guys props for that. And it's not knocking those guys. That's what we told them the last time, is that a lot of the things you hear is jealousy. Like, we all wish we had 100 people walking in there, right? It would be awesome. But there is a different philosophy. I knowing what I do and what you do and what Gary does is not going to lead to that. But there's still, I know that, and I'm not changing it, because there's just a value in getting my ass kicked every day in a different hard way, and not being what I would need to be. And if those days that I'm not what I want to be, those are days to make myself a better person, right? And what you said was, quite frankly, beautiful. I like the way that it was very articulate put. But do you still have, and this goes back to what Gary was saying too, and for all of us, we still have people that aren't competing. Do you lessen what they do in class? Do you say, let me give you a good example. For example, Tom DeBlas, who most people know on social media and ADC world champion, friend of mine's come to the gym, and he gave an example is that, let's say the three of us are rolling and I bust my nose. If I'm competing, he's going to say, fuck you, just get back out there and roll. If I'm a non-competitor, he's going to baby me and say, hey, let's fix your nose. And he treats his competitors and non-competitors different. He can have them in the same room, but there's a difference, right? He's a little harder on the competitors than he is on the normal guy, the hobbyist that's still rolling hard. And he expects more out of those people because they are essentially now athletes, whether it's amateur or pro, they're athletes. And he treats them such. And I think that I like the way he put that, right? Like that's a good point. Cause I am very similar. Like if I have a fighter, they complain, I tell them to fuck off. And, if you complain that and you're not a fighter, I'm more apt to listen to your story, even if I don't really care. It's kind of one of those things, but how are you treating people differently at your gym? How are you getting ready for competition? How do you change your training?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good question. So we'll typically go in sort of waves, right? So we'll sort of start amping up for a competition when we're actively training for one. And then we'll sort of start simmering down, and then maybe we'll dip into the fundamentals a little bit, deeper, and then we'll start amping up the drilling and the intensity again. And I think one of the important things for like varying students is, like I said before, like gauging their expectations first. And what you said it was really good. If you're running a pure self-defense school, you're going to run a lot of people off, or if you're running a pure self-defense school versus a competition school, you're going to run people off throwing them into the gauntlet, right? So people won't, some people get thrown into the gauntlet. By gauntlet, I mean just like you kind of throw them into rolling, right? And they'll get squished by some blue belt and sort of like pressure passed, or just like pressure to death, right? Maybe not even submitted, just like held really tight. And then people are just like, you know what? This is not for me. This is not what I expected. And that's what when I always go to the expectations, you got to get into their mind frame. They expected to go in there and for me to show them some hidden, kung fu, beautiful, like crazy technique that will get them out of every engagement that they'll ever face. And for some people, that's kind of the truth. That's what they're expecting for me to do for them. Show them 3, 2, 5, maybe even techniques that will get them out of every single situation, so that they can take the technique in and just be finally comfortable, and then just go home and be done with it. And that's just sort of the mind frame people come in with. So I try to get that idea out of them, see if that's what they're looking for exactly. And then I ease them into what it's actually going to be like. So when people come in, it's a very, very gradual increase of intensity, to the point where they don't even notice that if I put them when they first started, like maybe they trained with us for 2-3 months. If I took the 2-3 months ago person and moved them up into the future and had them roll the way they're rolling in 2 or 3 months, they would think they're getting like it's a complete war. You know what I mean? But because like you sort of put them into the bathtub and like increase the water temperature slowly, they don't notice that the intensity is increasing, like the technique's increasing, like things are starting to happen. That's sort of how I handle it at the gym. First, they'll roll with me. Like I roll with everybody that comes in, like all the white belts. I'm almost like 99% of the time I'm their first roll. So they'll roll with me and I'll get a gauge, and that gauge will decide whether they'll wait 2 weeks before they start actively rolling, or they can start rolling right away. And that's basically how I decide. If how I gauge it is essentially just their sort of like body mechanics. Like, do they move like relatively well? Are they athletic to any degree? Like, will they hurt themselves just like falling over and like posting their arm? Like some people come in, they're just not prepared, and they're not super sort of agile. They're not ready for like the engagement. So for them, I'll wait for them for about like 2 weeks to a month, depending on how they are. So start doing like shrimping drills, all the regular stuff until they're ready to go. Other people, day one, they're ready to go. Like I'll start rolling with them. I'll roll with them. I'll pick somebody out of my crew, purple belt, brown belt, whatever. I'll have them roll with them. And then I'll just stick with those guys for about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, okay, so now you can roll with the blue belts. Okay, now you could roll with the white belts, because the chaos increases as you go down the ranks. Like it just gets more and more chaotic. And by that point, maybe 2 or 3 months have passed and they haven't really realized that they've really, like, they're going pretty hard with the other white belts. You know what I mean? Like the intensity is up and they don't really notice that it happens. And then we start sort of amping up for tournaments, and I let them know, I'm like, okay, we're getting ready to start tournament training now. So you guys get ready. It's going to start getting a little bit more intense. The drills are going to get a little bit more intense. If you got any wrestlers that come through the school, like, the wrestlers are going to go hard on everybody. So I just sort of get everybody prepared for like dealing with the wrestlers and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I just have conversations with people like that. And that's sort of my approach, to like that slow sort of amp up of the intensity. But I honestly, I try to get, if people are capable, I try to get them to start to roll from day one. And I think that really helps. That helps a ton.
So when it comes to competition time, you're getting ready for competition. There's one that's coming up. You guys know that you want to start getting ready for that. If there's a guy who you think is, he'd be a good competitor, do you say something to him? Do you wait for him to come to you and say, "Hey, coach, I'm ready. I think, what do you think about me doing a competition?" Or do you do it the way that I do it, which is normally I just announce, "Hey, we got this big competition coming up." Obviously it's not mandatory that anybody compete, but I think a lot of you guys are ready. If you want to talk to me about it, and we can go ahead and get things moving, and I'll tell you what we need to start doing. How do you approach the first time jiu-jitsu competitor?
Almost exactly how you just said. Yeah. So like I said, when they come in, I that's typically one of the questions I'll ask them. I'm like, are you interested in competing at all? And some people are like, competing? What do you mean? What is that even? Like they're just not on the radar with that stuff. They're just sort of coming in. Some people are like, competing, awesome. Like, yeah, I'll want to compete someday when you think I'm ready. You know what I mean? So I'll get a gauge there, but I sort of do it like that. I'll approach the guys that I think are fit to compete, that will do well, that can sort of handle the training, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll go to them and be like, listen, it's exactly the same way. Like, it's not mandatory. You do not have to compete if you train with us. If you want, I think you're going to do really well. And I think you'll enjoy the training process. I think because like you want to train for competition. And yeah, we'll have basically exactly that conversation. And then, and then I'll sort of guide the training from there on in. Yeah.
So what do you think this question is for both you guys. Out of your gym, all the people that you have, what is the percentage of people that you have competing versus non-competing? Which is a hard question, but because we're not good at math, none of us, we're jiu-jitsu people. Right? So, what do you think?
I'd say, that's a tough question to put a number on it. I'd say probably half. I'd say probably half the people. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I'd say probably half.
Yeah, that's. I think that's good for any school, to be honest. Have half. I would say maybe, if I'm lucky, I would say maybe 25% would be interested in competition. Now, a big part of that is we're a newer school, and so it's just trying to build numbers. And most of my guys are mid 30s to early 40s guys, and so they're kind of past the standard age of competition, I guess. But I would say probably about 25% for us.
Yeah, and actually, I would say close to the same, Gary, which is crazy, right? Like, we have so many people, but things have changed over the years. I mean, it just is what it is. I don't know. I don't know why our gym, like, there was a time when almost everybody was competing, 80% to now, where I think it's 25% roughly. I've got, a handful of guys, but it's interesting, right? When we all still consider ourselves a more of a competition gym than a self-defense gym, and we still have 25 to 50% that compete. So it's still like, in essence, we are kind of the same, right? Well, here's the thing, like, and I go in that boat too. I would say that I train to compete, but don't compete, right? I'm 90% hurt. And the other problem is, Dan, we've talked about this on a bunch of podcasts, but since you're on here now, it's like my instructor, which is Marcelo Montero, always says, "Hey, compete for fun, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, well, losing's not fun for me. So winning is fun. So if I go to a competition and I don't win, what I'm going to look at is, okay, I lost. So my training was 2 to 3 days a week. I probably should up that to 5 to 6. So then I'm going to start taking away from work or family or blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I don't have the time to do that. And I do feel like that's my thing. So maybe it trickles down from the top down, which the difference is Gary competes all the time. Maybe his guys compete more. I don't know how much you compete, Dan, but it does travel from the top down, right? Like I always tell people, when we run into a gym and everybody's a dickhead, that probably means their instructor's a dickhead, right? When people come to our gym, they're like, man, everybody's cool, man, they're nice. I'm hoping that means I'm cool and nice, right? It kind of filters the way down. And the same. So I'm not going to ask my people at my gym to compete if I'm not out there on the mat competing the same, right? It's just not. The times past, I did a lot as a blue belt, purple belt. And then as time got on, I grew up and had a family and life, and things changed and priorities changed. And so it's a little bit different. Doesn't mean, and that's also what I tell people, I'm not going to ask you to do things that I don't do, right? If you want to compete. And that's kind of how I frame the question, is like, hey, here's the other thing. I put on most of the competitions in West Virginia. I do them to give you guys an opportunity to compete. But it also doesn't mean that I'm trying to steal your money. It doesn't mean, like, and Gary knows, and Dan, you haven't been seen that, like even at my tournaments with my people, we have a lot of kids that compete. So that's a little bit different. So when it comes to kids, then probably 80% of the kids compete. But when it comes to adults, maybe 25%, right? And that's because I tell them straight up, man, I'm not out there. So I'm not asking you to do it. And I'm not requiring you to do it in order to get a belt rank like other places do. That would be hypocritical of me. And it's not cool, So therefore it's a little bit different. But that being said, I also study, from all the guys that do compete. Like one of the guys that I quite frankly admire and I think's amazing and that's changing jiu-jitsu is Gordon Ryan, who's one of the best competitors ever, right? But I watch all his videos, and John Danaher, those guys are heavy competitors, right? And that's where I'm learning and training and teaching my guys. So it is weird, right? It's a little bit different, like meaning that there's a weird dichotomy and a weird change. And I guess that's what we talked about in the last thing. It's not a self-defense, just like you said, Dan. It's not a versus, because if I was going to argue, when Elio made jiu-jitsu, he flat out says he made it for self-defense, right? And it's a style versus style, but we're beyond style versus style, right? When Carlos Gracie made IBJJF and these things, it was jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu. So your best jiu-jitsu versus my best jiu-jitsu, your school versus my school. Let's see who the best school is. And that's where everybody should train. That's kind of what it did in Brazil. They have a school in every block, right? I'm kind of on that same wavelength, right? Meaning that I do think there's validation in winning tournaments. There is, right? And I still want my team to be, it doesn't mean that I don't like your team or Gary's team, right? It's all friendly competition, right? It's friendly. That's what I always tell people, even when, ground zero for me is in Huntington, and Gary and I were talking about this before we got on the podcast. There was a time when we didn't like each other. There's no reason to not like each other. We're an hour apart. It doesn't mean I didn't like him, but like if somebody from Charleston parked in Huntington with a Butch Hiles sticker on their car, somebody took, and this really did happen, took Sharpie and wrote Butch Hiles sucks, blah, 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 right? And probably the vice versa, right? And it was kind of more like a gang mentality. As we got older, everybody's cool with everybody, right? But it still doesn't mean that ground zero in Huntington doesn't want to beat me and I don't want to beat them. It's still like a friendly competition. It doesn't mean that my team doesn't want to beat your team or Gary. Like it's ego, right? It means when I roll, I don't want to lose, right? Like I still want to do well. Anyway, it's a different thing. There's value in that training, and I think we love it. That's one of the talks I was having at my gym tonight. As far back as you can go in human time, in humanity, there's paintings of two guys fighting, right? Whether it's wrestling or we don't even know what's going on, but there's two guys fucking each other up, right? Like there's something going on. That's what's in us. We've got to let that go, and we got to get that out. There's nothing like, for me, going to jiu-jitsu, just like tonight. This is the first time I've been able to roll in 2 months because I've had this eye injury. There's just something about somebody trying to kill me that makes me feel alive and changes me. And then me trying to kill them and overcome that and going home and getting all that stress and anxiety out of my body and feeling like a different person. Right. And I think that's what the three of us, we're all in pretty much the same wavelength, what I can tell from here. That's what we like about the hard training, right? That the same hard training that might run the majority of people off, and why we don't have 100 people, but we're okay with that because there's something that draws us to that is like, look, I'm going to come here and for 5 minutes, I want you to try to kill me. Right. And I'm going to try to kill you. And look, I might be hurt after this and that sucks. And, I got to deal with that problem, but man, that makes me feel alive, and that makes me feel different. That makes me want to change my life, makes me want to be a better person, makes me want to not drink, makes me want to not do drugs, makes me want to, work out more, just like Dan said. And I look at Dan's room, it's filled with exercise equipment aside from the baby stuff, and get at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it makes me want to get at it, and that's the difference. What took me away from what I still love is the self-defense. I still believe in it, just like you guys. I still love it. But I love it for a different reason. It's not for me. If I had to go every day and just do self-defense moves, I would probably do something different, quite frankly. But I like mixing that in with the hard training, and that's why I'm in the middle. And I do similar to what you guys said. Even though I have 25% compete, we still train like they're competing. The difference is, hey man, I'm like, hey, if you don't want to roll with a guy that's 200 pounds and you're 130 pounds, go ahead. Now, if they were competing, no, you need to get with different body types. You need to do different stuff. So there is a dichotomy of how you train these certain people, right? And I think we all agree with that. But yeah, it's interesting, the world of jiu-jitsu, how it can be so vastly different, right? And then there's some gyms that are 100% competition, right? I'm sure you guys have been to them where, well, like Gary said last podcast, that Daisy Fresh, there's probably 90% of people at jiu-jitsu that could not survive in that gym, right? I mean, maybe even myself, right? Like, I'm so fucking injury prone that maybe I survive a day. I'm saying, like, you know what I'm saying? That gym's hard. We're somewhere in the middle, right? And I'm proud of that. I'm okay with that because that's not my thing. They're trying to win IBJJF Worlds and prove that they're a real gym. And I was there at one point in my life, but I'm done with that. But we all got our different motivations right now, and we're all doing our thing, and I think we're all doing a great thing, quite frankly. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I could just keep talking.
Well, it kind of now I'm thinking about another question. Like, for you, Dan, are you still competing? One, and then did you change your routine other than like eating healthier or anything like that? Did you change your routine when you had a big competition coming up, whether it be some sort of IBJJF or something like that?
So I compete with the team any chance I get. So if we're going out to a competition anywhere, I'll go out and compete as well. As far as my routine change, I can probably change my routine to compete better, but typically I'll just increase the rolling intensity in the gym. That'll be sort of my main routine change. So my sort of workout methodology is I try to work out in little bits through the entire day. So, and I tell this to my students because I have a lot of people coming in and asking like, okay, so what do I do now, like outside of the gym? But you were saying like when people start training and they start thinking about their jiu-jitsu more, and they have an open mat on Saturday, and people are calling them out to go out on Friday to go drinking, and they're like, you know what? I kind of want to perform at this open mat. I don't want to be hungover for this open mat, so I'm not going to go drink today on Friday. That's not a small thing. That's a pretty big sort of mindset change. That starts to very slowly shift your trajectory. That starts to build momentum in a certain direction and break momentum that was going in a different direction. So that one moment where somebody just sitting there like, okay, no, I'm not going out today. I got training tomorrow. That's a big thing. So people shouldn't take that for granted. if you're starting to train and you sort of made that conscious decision. So anybody that's done that, props to them. That's a big mental step to sort of make. But yeah, as far as competition training, my regular training is all day. I'll do like I stay like active through the entire day, or I try to stay active through the entire day. I got pull-up bars like all over the house and all the doorways, or like a majority of the doorways. So anytime you pass a doorway, pull-ups, 5 pull-ups real quick. I got pull-up bars all over the place. So by the end of the day, you've done whatever crazy amount of pull-ups, right? Instead of when you have to make a conscious effort, if you're going to work out, that's really difficult for people, where like, okay, I'm going to dedicate whatever, an hour of time to work out today. That's sort of a tough, like, mental thing for people to sort of jump over, right? First, they have to decide that they're going to do that. And then they have to do a really difficult thing of actually doing that. And actually doing that is really tough when the time comes for it. It's like, I was going to train at 2:00 today, or whatever. And now 2:00 comes and you're like, oh, man, I don't know. I'm a little tired, actually. And then you're done. You're not working out that day. It's a lot easier for you to mentally get in the zone where, like, all I got to do is one pull up every time I pass this doorway. That's an easy thing for somebody to wrap their head around, right? So like I said, like, you sort of increase the temperature in the bathtub. That's sort of how you can do it throughout the day. And that's sort of how I've done it for my training. And then I go like into the gym and I train hard with the guys and the girls and everybody, you know what I mean? And then closer to competition, I'll start like doing like a little bit more weight training, running sprints, things like that, like sort of getting into shape, do a lot of like hiking and stuff like that. But for general, I always tell my students, do a little bit, a lot throughout the entire day. It really, really, really adds up, especially as well if you don't have a whole lot of time. It's a big decision for you to come in and train 2-3 times a day, or 2-3 times a week. You want to go in there and you want to train, right? Whatever, you got an hour, you got 2 hours, right? You got kids, you got your job, you have your family, everything, whatever, your hobbies, whatever it is. It's a big thing to dedicate. Okay, it's 5:00. I got to head to the gym. You drive over there a half hour. You're going to work out for 2 hours. That's a lot of time. Make use of that 2 hours. You know what I mean? You need to make use of that hour, 2 hours, however long you are in the gym. What's going to help you is staying limber throughout the entire day, to at least a little bit of a degree, right? Like doing your like active warm up through the whole day. Your body can really handle it. It doesn't have to be super intense, right? 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there. Hop up on the pull-up bar, do 2 pull-ups. You know what I mean? Maybe 2 pull-ups is super easy for you. That's fine. Do 2 pull-ups. Get into the full squat position, hang out there while you're watching TV. Wrestle with your dogs a little bit, get into like your jiu-jitsu positions. I tell this to my students all the time. Most of them have a great reaction to it because they come into class and they're ready to go. You know what I mean? They're amped up. They don't need a huge warm up. Sometimes we'll skip the warm up to begin with. If I feel like the energy in the room, they're ready to go. That's sort of a big thing for me. That's what I do actively. And then just increase the intensity there when I'm getting ready closer to competition.
I think that's great advice. For example, there was a lady on the Today Show, and that's what exactly what you just said, word for word. She called it workout snacking, and it was like a segment, and they're making a big deal out of it. But it literally is exactly what she just said, is that most people cannot, in their mind, initially wrap their mind around working out for an hour or two, or they just find an excuse that they're just too tired for that hour or two, right? It just becomes an excuse that I can't do it. So she was like, look, every time you have a little bit of time, just do a little bit of things, right? Whether it's 10, 20 squats, a couple push-ups, and then throughout the day, then now you've completed a workout. It does not have to be all in one. And then it takes the burden off you mentally, physically, everything, right? And that's a great way to start, right? And then there's another book that I don't remember the name, but it was recommended to me. But the theory behind the whole book was convince yourself to do one of everything. So for example, if my goal is to do 100 push-ups, well, don't tell yourself you need to do 100 push-ups a day, because guess what? You're just going to talk yourself out. But convince yourself you're going to do 1 push-up a day, because anybody can do 1 push-up a day. So what'll happen is, you write that down. My goal is to do 1 push-up a day. I sit down on tonight, which is whatever day it is, Wednesday night. And I was like, I'm going to do one push-up, but I'll do 5 or I'll do 10. And then tomorrow, same thing. It's just one, because mentally one doesn't bother me. So I'm like, I can't make the excuse that I don't have time or I'm too busy, because it's one, right? So, and I've done that in the shower before. Once I read that book, I was like, man, I didn't do my air squats, right? So then next thing I know, I'm like, all right, I got to just do one. So instead of doing one, I do 5 or 10 in the shower, right? And then I get out of the shower. It's like, once your mind is cool with it, and that's how the book is. It was like, the guy was even said, like, initially I was like, I just couldn't work out. So my goal was, work out every day, but I couldn't do it. So I started easy. I was like, how about just show up to the gym every day? So he showed up in the parking lot. That was step 1. He's like, I showed up in the parking lot, day 1, parking lot, day 2, parking lot, day 3, parking lot, day 4, I worked out. It's just start easy, right? And maybe for some people that aren't as physically motivated as some of us, that's the way to go. And even as physically motivated as I have been, it wavers, right? Especially during COVID, we were all a little bit depressed because I figured out, I didn't know. I really figured out that jiu-jitsu is the only thing I fucking like, period. Not, sorry to cuss, but I mean, it literally was. I thought I liked working out until it was time to work out. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, guess what? I just like to go roll with men. I didn't know that. I had no earthly idea that was my only form of working out. And then that changed, then I had to change things. And so then I started looking at these books and the things that you just said. That is the greatest advice you can give a person. Look, do not do things like some of us can just go cold turkey, start a program, jump in there, right? We have all done it. But really, why don't you start easy? And then once you're started, once you're in the groove, it's going to be easier to keep going, right? Like it'd be the same thing if I was, I wouldn't stop and drinking soda or pop, right? If I'm drinking 4 a day, why don't I cut that to 3 and then eventually cut that to 2 and then cut to 1 and then I'm 0? Way better than cold turkey. Like you can do that, but how many people do that cold turkey and then they're miserable and they just start back, right? It's like very similar with working out. Why don't you start slow? Just do 1 or 2. Do this for as long as you can. Build it up. I think what you just said, Dan, was amazing, because there's no reason we couldn't put those pull-up bars from GNC or whatever in your door frame. They're there. They're $20, right? Put them in there. Yeah, do a couple.
$20, throw them in your office door or whatever in the hallway. Yeah, throw them up. Will you walk past the doorway? Do one pull-up. Can't do a pull-up? Grab the bar, hang there for like 5 seconds. Done.
Which is super bad. Even that, just hanging there, is beneficial to your shoulders, to your everything. I mean,
and dieting, like you mentioned, dieting is sort of the same way. I tell people when people ask me for dieting advice, almost exactly what you said. People try to look for dieting advice and they're like, okay, well, you're going to need to do intermittent fasting. So you're going to have to cut down your eating window to 6 hours. So figure out when you can eat for 6 hours, cut out like carb, sugar, whatever. Make sure you can only eat this, and that. Make sure you steam your vegetables, whatever, like all these, a million different things, right? Yeah. All right. Stop drinking soda. Can you stop drinking soda? Is that one step that you can do that for like three months? Forget everything else. Eat whatever else you've been eating. Do whatever else you've been doing. Can you stop drinking soda? Can you stop drinking soda less if it's really difficult? You can't just like cold turkey stop soda. You know what I mean? Those sort of like little baby steps. Like adjust what you're drinking. Don't worry about what you're eating yet. Yeah. And that will sort of pick up the momentum. Like I tell everybody in class, like your life is really about momentum. Like you pick up momentum, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And if it's bad and people aren't around to check you, or like you don't check yourself, it could end up in a bad place, right? If it's good, it could be really good. But the thing is like the momentum will carry you through your life. You will wake up one day 10 years later and be like, whoa, like what happened? What was I doing? What was I doing for 10 years? You know what I mean? Like it takes hold of you. It's the same way when with exercise and jiu-jitsu, and those are some of the things, and dieting, those are some of the things that can sort of like deviate you from whatever trajectory you're on. So yeah, I'm a big believer in just like taking those small steps. They're easy on the mind. That's the important thing. And people, when they start to decide they're going to make some changes, sometimes in this day and age with all this information, it's a little bit information overload. when you go on YouTube and start researching things, be like, all right, how do I get in shape? How do I like lose weight? How do I do this and that? And be like, a lot of these people are getting advice that like Olympic athletes get, you know what I mean? Like things that are like Olympic athletes are doing, right? You don't really need that to the level that you're trying to like, to the goals that you're trying to achieve. What you really need for most people is simple, just like a simple mental trick to get you to start like putting your foot in the right direction. It doesn't have to be like a massive thing. For some people it is. That's just their nature, right? They're like more impulsive like that. They could just turn the switch and change it, right? But I would say in my experience, for the majority of the people, that's not the case. For the majority of the people, it's much easier to take these tiny, tiny little baby steps that are mentally easier, that slowly start to lift like the mental fog away. And then you start building that momentum. And like exactly how you said with the squats, right? You do one squat and in your mind, you're like, one squat is going to be really difficult. I'm going to really like do this one squat and that'll be done. You do your one squat and then you're like, that felt like nothing. I could do another one. And like, that was easy too. I'll do another one. Before that, you did like 10 squats. You know what I mean? Yeah. Your goal was 1. You just 10x'd your anticipated output. That's massive. That's really big for people. You know what I mean? So that's sort of the mentality that I like to teach my students. And then I sort of try to live by as well.
And I think Tony Robbins is a guy, I've heard it quoted a lot, but if your 2 ships are on the same trajectory and one makes a 1% change, right, slightly off to the right, by the course of a year or whatever, they're going to be far off the right. And that's just like you said, it's building momentum. Like it might not look like much, but that 1% change over the course of a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months is going to be monumental. All of a sudden they're in a different trajectory than the other ship going the same way. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way to look at these things. And again, I get it. Right. We all want to go, balls to the wall with whatever we're doing, especially most of these men doing jiu-jitsu. You want to just go in, but those are the times you're most apt to fail because you'll mess up. Right. And then you're like, oh, I messed up and it's the end of the world and I might as well just, quit or, it's just not that way. Right. We're all going to be like that. So take it easy on yourself, make tiny changes. Those tiny changes are going to build up over the year. And I'll tell you just a small example of the same thing. Just what I was telling earlier, like I work at Greenbrier Medical Center, right? 2 hours from my house, 2.5 hours from my house. And a lot of times I'd work all day. My whole point was I wasn't going to eat all day and I wouldn't. So I'd get off work at 5 o'clock, but there's a Wendy's right next to it. So I would stop and I was like, well, chicken's healthy. So I get me like 20 chicken nuggets at the end of the day, which still, looking back, not that bad, right? 20 chicken nuggets, eat them, go home. The problem is that fried food and those oils and stuff didn't sit with my body. So maybe that's all I ate today was 20 chicken nuggets. But one day I was like, man, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of going to Wendy's, I'm going to stop at the gas station that's right next door and I'm going to get nuts and jerky. That was the only change I made. I was like, I'm going to stop eating this fast food. So, it's been a lot of time now, but I've lost 10 or 15 pounds with that just little change. No, and it wasn't immediate. There wasn't like next week I'm 10 or 15. It was just like, now that I'm not eating this processed fried food that I somewhat thought was healthy, even though I kind of knew that it's not because it's that pink slime that they put in fake chicken nuggets. You know what I'm saying? Like now that I'm eating regular nuts and jerky, I mean, that's about the healthiest thing you can get at a gas station most of the time. There's a big change, 10 or 15 pounds. That's pretty big over the course of, a month or two, whatever it's been. It's probably actually 6 months, but that's the only change I've made, man. So I can tell it's another small change. Now, if I make another small change, which would be maybe roll more, maybe work out more, or maybe change this, then that another small change is going to equate to a little bit more. Therefore, I'm not suffering. I'm not like, okay, I need to eat keto, which is not, which I could handle, but a lot of people couldn't handle that because they love their carbs, they love their bread, they love their pizza, and then they're miserable, and then they're like, fuck it, I'm going right back, right? That's the thing. I chose a small thing, which is a big difference. So it's a great advice. And this is what I noticed too, which Gary's very similar. Maybe I'm the same, but you guys are true leaders. Like I love when I hear what advice you give the people in your gym and what you say. Dan, how did you have a mentor? Like, it may be the same question for you, Gary, because I've always been amazed by the way you guys are able to lead by example, give great advice. I mean, how have you guys been able to do this? Like, Dan, you don't look very old. I know Gary's not very old, but you give great advice. I mean, you are true leaders, which is amazing. Do you have an idea how you got to this point? Is it just pure luck, or like, are you just born that way, or you get it from your mama, like the song goes, or like, what's going on with that? I mean, and also true admiration. I appreciate, one of the things I study is great leaders. I would, not that Hitler is a great leader by any means, but I'm fascinated by people that can lead people and they're powerful. And even if it's a bad thing, I'm sure you guys heard, I mean, it's amazing to me that people that can influence people. And that was a terrible example that I just made with like Hitler, but what I'm saying is you guys are amazing. So what do you think attributes to that, or how did that come about, or do you even know, or if this is the first time you're hearing that you're awesome? Like, what's going
on? So yeah, I never really considered myself like as a leader, even in like the gym environment. I guess I never really like framed my mind that way. I basically I told people what worked for me. You know, is basically just trial and error. And people would come with certain questions, and I'd give them certain answers, and it would either work for them or not. You know what I mean? And then it did for some of them. And then other people asked me, and I told them again the same thing, and it worked for them again. And like I said, it's kind of momentum, right? It just sort of steamrolls. And everything I tell them is something that I do. So I have, I have experience with it. It's tough for me mentally. Like the important thing, like to work out, the important thing, I think one of the important things about jiu-jitsu is truth, right? When you start training jiu-jitsu, you're confronted with truth. That's one of the things that's really difficult for people to sort of break through. You're sort of looking at yourself in the mirror and you're like, all right, am I gonna make the effort, or am I not gonna make the effort? You know, and some people step down from themselves. There's nobody in your way, right? There's a bunch of difficult roles in the gym and stuff. But I always tell my students, I have some people that come to me like after 3 or 4 months of training, right? And they're like, listen, I don't really feel like I'm progressing. Like, I don't think this is working for me. Like, I'm just not getting any better. And it's still really difficult. I thought it would get easier, and it's not getting easier. And I'm like, are you sure you're not progressing? Like, you're sure? They're like, yeah, I'm not progressing. I'm like, all right, let's do a mental exercise together. Imagine yourself, go back 3-4 months before you started training. Take that person, pluck them out of history, and put them right now into the present, and now fight yourself. What's the outcome? And for 100% of the people, like, dude, I kick my own ass. Like, if you started training and you brought your past self forward, you will destroy yourself. But everybody sort of compares themselves to everybody else. Like, I thought I'd be able to handle these blue belts now, but I can't. You know what I mean? And people coming into the gym and they're still beating me. Well, that's not you, right? You're sort of starting to defeat yourself. So you're confronted with that truth in jiu-jitsu all the time, in my opinion. And that's sort of how I gauge the school, right? Like I think about that about myself. It's really difficult for me to start to work out, like to make a segment of time to go work out. During the workout, it's tough. And like, I can't possibly be the only one. I need to make this easier on myself somehow. So that's how I started doing like the little bit a day that really picks some momentum. And I thought about it like, man, now that I started that, it's easier for me to jump into the gym and do like a half-hour harder workout or an hour harder workout, like lift some weights, like do it legit. Right. I just tell that to my students. It's my experience. I just tell them my experience, and some of them dig it and some of it don't, I guess. And that's just how I go about it.
So when it comes to leadership, I think there are a couple of different things that kind of put you in, I guess you call it natural leadership roles. And sometimes you're thrust into it, whether it be there's a situation somebody has to take over, and sometimes you're meant for it, right? But I think a couple things have to converge in order to be good leaders. And I think what you're saying right there is one of them is honesty. I think you have to be honest with the guys who are following, you know, whether it be your students or the platoon or the class or whatever it is, but you have to be honest with one, your goals, your expectations, reality. I think it's important that we're in tune with that. But then I think the other thing that probably all of us have here is a passion for what you're teaching. And I can tell you that I think I'm a good leader at jiu-jitsu, but there are plenty of things that I'm a terrible leader at because I couldn't give a shit less about them. And if it was anything besides, jiu-jitsu or whatever, like jiu-jitsu is one of those things that I just honestly enjoy. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a new person and I'm showing them a move that I've done 1,000 times, or if it's somebody who, me and a higher one of my higher belts and we're sparring hard and I have a new transition, or even if they have a new transition that they get to teach me, like the passion that you have for it, I think kind of drives a bit of that leadership quality, because people want to follow somebody who's having a good time. Whether it be the guy who's going streaking, right? Yeah. He's having a blast. And the reason people want to be around that guy is because he's truly enjoying what he's doing. And yeah, it's a silly thing, but that's the reason people follow that good time. When I'm doing jiu-jitsu, I promise for the 99% of the time, unless I'm competing and I'm getting the shit kicked out of me, like I am having a great time. It's my favorite place to be outside of hanging out with my family and kids. And I can't think of anything better to do. And I think I'm almost positive that everybody knows that in my class. And so I think that's one of the things that helped me. Now, as far as like personality stuff, obviously, I think there are things that can help personality wise to make you a better leader. For me, I came from a big family. I had younger brothers and sisters, and so they naturally had to listen to me. So maybe I had a head start in kind of, skills as far as like showing people which direction to go or better ways of conveying information. But I think really that what helps me is my passion. And I think that's everybody here. Cause I know, Butch, when I've learned from you, like you sound like, maybe you don't, but you sound like you love what you're doing. And Dan, I can tell by the way you're talking about it that you're the same way.
Yeah. Well, I think and Dan brought this up early on, right, is maybe we don't think, meaning Dan and I'm speaking for him a little bit, but we don't think of ourselves as a leader. But what I am doing is sharing what somebody else showed me. So conversely, I am a leader, right? Somebody shows me something, I show them everything I got. I'm not hiding anything. And Gary, you're the same way, right? And we've done that. All of us have done that same way, because we all, obviously I'm in Charleston, that's capital West Virginia, but Charleston's small too. And I've been around jiu-jitsu since, the 90s, where there was no jiu-jitsu, where Hoist Gracie came out in 1993. There was no jiu-jitsu schools. And in order to make a jiu-jitsu school, I had to be it. And that's why I'm here today. But because of that, I learned what I could and I shared it. And that conversely made me a leader, whether I wanted to be or not. I had to explain the same thing to my wife, because she was new when she met me. She was like, man, you really love jiu-jitsu, and I do. But she asked me, like, how is it that you came to this? How did you lead this and become a gym? And I said, I don't know. It was like, first of all, we trained in my garage, and then it grew to where we had to have a gym because we got too big, and then it became this. But I was I didn't want to be that. Right. I wanted to train, but it just happened to be, I was the guy with the knowledge. So I had to go on. And similar to Dan's story, I started in Glenville, West Virginia, and I had a couple trainers, and the guys that I trained with, one of them fought in Pride too. Right. So we're kind of one of the, even though we're small, we had a guy that fought in that, but anyway, I moved to Charleston, and I did pretty much what Dan did. I didn't have an ad per se, but I was going on message boards, like MMA message boards and these little things, and say, hey, is there anybody in Charleston that trains? And then I found some guys that were training, and they didn't have any formal training, but they were good. Like one of them was the hook and shoot world champion. For people that don't know what hook and shoot is, but that's where the Minotauro brothers came from, and several of the women, they threw the first all women's MMA card. That's Jeff Osborne, who also was a UFC commentator, and anyway, one of the pioneers of MMA. So anyway, I got lucky and I was with these guys, and I taught them at the time. That's when I did Golden Gloves. I was able to teach them stand up, and they taught me jiu-jitsu, and then I decided I wanted some formal training. So anyway, so it went on, and then I had a gym, and I was just like you guys. I had to train those guys. So I was a reluctant leader in a way, but speaking the truth, meaning like, hey, like if it doesn't work, if you can kick my ass, that's fine. Let's figure it out together. And then there is some validation in that, because you're not a liar. It's not like running a cult where ultimately my goal was to sleep with all the women in the cult, right? Like it's like we had a thing, and the goal was to actually to get better together. And because of that, since the late 90s, I still have a gym. That's 20 plus years, which shows that I'm obviously on the right track, or I wouldn't have that. And I've had a lot of success stories, as do you guys, right? You came, Dan, for example, just since we're talking to him, he came to West Virginia just looking for training partners, and all of a sudden now he's running a gym, right? It may not have been his original goal, or maybe it was in the back of his mind, but it maybe came too soon. And I think the same for you, Gary, right? You started training and you wanted to be trained, and then next thing you know, you're training other people. It's not because of a problem per se, but it was, look, I have this vision. In order to make this vision work where I live, I'm the guy. So let me start my vision. Let's see what happens. And then it's not even really see if people follow you, but let's put my vision on the table. And then people did follow you, right? It's not even like you said, you're not, or like I'm saying, you're not trying to make people follow you. If they do, they do. And that validates the thing. And I know, obviously, because Gary and you, we've been friends for a while, and Dan, you don't know Gary as well as I do, but obviously, like I met Gary through competition, through doing the WVGO, and I would ref a lot at the end. At the beginning, I run the tournament, and Gary was always there competing, and by the end, especially because he was a higher belt, I was on refing, and I'd be like, "Hey, dude," and like I just sit and talk to people. I'm like, "Man, you're killing everybody," or this and that. And he'd laugh, and we'd talk, and this is the thing. I'd end up being friends with most of the people. Like if you ever look at a lot of the guys that compete, that's the thing. They're friends with me just because I'm bullshitting with them, right? I'm like, "Man, you're killing this guy," or but I'm not being disrespectful to the other guy. Like I'm like, "Hey, man, you did a good job," it just whatever. But I also appreciate great people, and Gary's one of them. And Dan, that's kind of why you're on here. Like the more and more that I heard about you from the hospital, the more and more it validated you as an individual, because again, I knew of Adam Martin, and I knew obviously of Brian Adderson and all these guys. But when I'm hearing regular people saying that I love this gym and I love what they represent and I love how they're helping my child, that's what put you on the radar, was that guy I told you. I don't remember his name, and pretty sure he had something to do with wrestling, but he's just saying how it made his son a different person. And then he was like, because my son did it, I started doing it, and it's made me a better person. It was like those things touched me, because that's the same thing I hear at my gym, and I'm sure that you both hear at your gym. And that's the thing that motivates me to keep going. Like all the days that maybe you have a bad day and I'm like, I'm tired of waking up every day and finding a new thing to teach. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm over it. And then somebody tells you how much you changed their life and how important you are to them. Then you're like, man, this validates everything that I started jiu-jitsu for. This is why I'm doing it. And then it motivates you to become a better person too, because it's like, if I'm starting to get burned out, I'm like, hey man, it just lit a spark under me that I need to be better. I am getting complacent. Maybe I'm teaching the same stupid stuff every day. Maybe I'm not studying. I'm not getting better. I'm living off whatever. And that's what happened to me. I'll be honest with you guys, is that, the whole new John Danaher leg lock game came out, and I was pretty resistant to it, not in a bad way. I was like, man, if somebody starts beating me with that, then I'll learn it, and then lo and behold, and people start beating me with it. And I was like, true to my word, I said, well, now I got to start learning. And I still got to devolve. I have to really like humble myself, right? And go out there and do some things that I didn't think I'd ever have to do, because I thought I'd become a black belt and then I'd be Bruce Lee or something. I don't know what I thought, but it's not like what happens, right? In jiu-jitsu is you become a black belt and then you become a beginner. I hear that all the time. People become a black belt and they feel like, now I don't feel like I knew anything. And that's how I feel, right? Because I'm a black belt, somebody else comes in, so what's this move? And if I say I don't know, that's not cool, right? I have to know. There's a lot of things out there, right? Jiu-jitsu grows and evolves. Like this leg lock game wasn't there 2 years ago, and it is now, right? And I'm a little late to the game. Dan, you're probably ahead of me. Gary, you're probably ahead of me. I was pretty resistant just because I thought it was BS. I was like, I've been around this shit 20 years. I've heard all these bullshit. Like, I've heard rubber guard. I've heard this. I've heard that. It never matters. Well, it does matter because all of a sudden now I can't last 2 minutes with some of these people. I used to kick their ass, and now 2 minutes they're like, bam, bam, bam. But that being said, that's also what makes me a better person, because I got to humble myself. I got to learn. And the other thing is, I got to go out and be better, which is the point of life, right? I can just cruise, or every day I can go out and kick some ass and try to be a better person, which is what jiu-jitsu does for all of us, I think, right? Is continues to make us a better person, because like Dan eloquently said, and Gary said multiple times, is you can't lie on the mat, right? I can come in and have a horrible day, but maybe win on the mat, or it doesn't matter. I can have a great day and get my ass kicked, and I get my ass kicked multiple times. So then I got to decide, am I going to hide and start skipping rolls? Am I going to start skipping this? Am I going to do this? Am I going to be a fake person? Or am I going to suck it up and learn something and get better and show the people at my gym that I can do that, which is hard to do, right? Like, because, most of the people at our gym look up to all three of us, right? So it's hard to one day, all these people that look up to you say, hey, I don't have all the answers. This guy just kicked my ass and I've got to figure this out. And that's tough. It's really humbling. It's really hard to do. But ultimately, I think everybody looks up to us more in a weird way. I'm not looking for anybody to look up to me, but I think they respect us more when they know you can admit when you're wrong. You can admit when you need to learn more, and you can do all those things. And that's what I get from you two. I'm not trying to put myself in the same boat with you guys, but I do say when you guys talk, when we ask these questions, they're very eloquently answered, very intelligently answered. And just so you know, I'm very impressed with your answers. I'm impressed. You're not dumb jocks. Let's put it that way. You're very smart guys. Like Dan, I've never talked to you, met you, but Gary, same with you and I talk all the time, but Dan's pretty fucking smart. Like he's pretty good, man. Like I'm very impressed with your analogies, the way you speak, the way you do things. And that's another great thing of jiu-jitsu. Like I think people think we're a bunch of idiots, right? That are just Neanderthals. But man, I'm impressed with your thought processes and how you come to conclusions and how you guys continue to make each other better, which is impressive. So, congrats to you guys, I guess.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway today is just like the momentum. That's the thing that's going to resonate with me from this is, I don't think Dan could have said a better word for it, is momentum. Correct. Put yourself on the right path and it'll carry, and it's the initial push that to get going. But after you get that little push and the first foot forward, you're just falling forward at this point. It's easy to stay marching, Mm-hmm. So I think this is going to be a good way to. And Dan, please tell us again where you're at, how people can get a hold of you, and where to find you.
I really appreciate the platform, guys. This is a really great talk. I really enjoyed talking to both of you guys. So we're Stellar Jiu-Jitsu, at Stellar Jiu-Jitsu. You can message us on Instagram, find us on Facebook. Pretty easy to get a hold of. We're in Lewisburg. We train out of the Greenbrier Valley Fitness Facility, right across the street from the hospital in Lewisburg. So we're pretty easy to find, but yeah, we're on all the socials. So message me anytime. We really, really encourage drop-ins. People just coming in to open mats. I'm a big believer in cross training. So tell my guys, you're anywhere you're at, go find a gym, go train. All right. So anybody that's sort of rolling through, and we have a bunch of people that just roll through, come in and train. It's a good environment. We love to have you guys. Really encourage cross training. And I was a jiu-jitsu nomad for a long time. So I trained from gym to gym, or wherever I was at, I would train. And that's one of the really, really beautiful things about jiu-jitsu. You could almost always anywhere find a gym, and like 90% of the time you got really awesome people in their training. And so yeah, drop in anytime. Yeah, get in touch.
So,
thank you guys.
So you, I just want to say this real quick. Sorry, are you literally across from the hospital I work at?
Yeah, we're in the CrossFit facility.
I don't know where that's at, but that's still fucked up. And I mean,
it's right across the street. Yeah, we're right
really?
there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, then I apologize, because I at least would have said hello. I swear to God, I was going there every Saturday for like months. So
yeah, we're dropping. We're directly across the street. There's a little CrossFit gym right there, and gymnastics. We're right next to the gymnastics. Super easy to find.
My apologies. So
and then Butch, we've got WVGO coming up on the 7th, correct?
Yeah. So anybody that don't know, this state championship. So every year, and some teams like SAS combine, right, and that makes it easier for them to win a banner. But so we do a team championship. So the best team wins, which is state championship, and then obviously individual things. But this is our biggest tournament of the year. Usually a couple hundred people. This is post-COVID, should be pretty awesome. Dan, just so we haven't talked to you, but if you or any of your students want to do super fights, let us know. We like to feature this. Here's the thing. This tournament is for West Virginia, right? Like I've been doing these tournaments since 2002 for West Virginia, meaning that, a lot of times we're ignored, which is period, right? So I try to keep a cheap tournament, and really feature the guys from here. So we've had everybody do super fights, and the point of the super fight, it's not win or lose, but it's to feature your gym and your guys, and we've had everybody. So if you're interested, whether it's you or anybody else listening to this, ask us, we'll get you on there. We want to make sure, and just also, I'm cutting off what I'm only saying, but Gary does a great job recently, which is Gary's brainchild. He's been doing a streaming event. I don't know if he's going to do it this time, but if he does, it's awesome. They have like a 2-3 man announcing team, and they talk about the matches, which has been phenomenal. So it's almost like, all those great things like Fight to Win, or whatever, who's number one. Gary and them are doing that exactly for you guys, talking just like their announcers, like the real deal, streaming on the WVGO or the Bobcat website. I think that's been a great addition, to everything. And this is, like, again, August 7th, usually our biggest tournament. Everybody comes. It's awesome. We got people from out of state coming. So anyway, anybody that wants to come, it's a yearly thing, annual event, come kick some ass. I'll be happy. Gary will be happy. Dan will be happy. I'll be happy. So yeah, let's see it happen.
All right. Well, again, Dan, thanks for joining us again. Like I said, momentum, man. I'm carrying this momentum into tomorrow's. Thank you, brother.
Cool, guys. I really appreciate the platform. Thank you guys so much. This is really awesome.
Yeah. All right. All right. Take it easy, guys.
See you.
All right. Good night, guys. You take it easy. I know it's late.